A billionaire's world of wealth and control is turned upside down when a simple hug from a stranger reveals the missing piece in his daughter's life and changes them all forever. Jonathan Hale had always been a man of habits. His life was carefully planned, with every day scheduled around meetings, phone calls, and endless decisions that shaped the vast empire he had built. He was one of the richest men in the country, a self-made billionaire whose name was known in boardrooms and newspapers alike. But despite all his success, there was one part of his life that he never seemed to have enough time for: his daughter, Emma. Emma was 6 years old, a bright and curious little girl with golden hair and sparkling eyes, full of energy and questions about the world around her. Jonathan loved her more than anything, but he often realized that in the rush of his life, he didn't get to spend nearly enough time with her. On that particular Sunday morning, Jonathan decided to take a break from his relentless schedule. He wanted to do something simple, something ordinary, that would make Emma happy. He decided to take her out for brunch at a small cafe in town, one he had never visited before. It was the kind of place that looked unremarkable from the outside, with wooden tables and a few cozy chairs. But Jonathan had a feeling it would be peaceful and quiet, a nice escape from his usual high-profile restaurants and private dining rooms. He wanted Emma to feel like she was having a normal morning out, free from bodyguards, cameras, and the pressures of his world. They arrived and were seated near a window where sunlight streamed in, casting a warm glow over the little table. Emma immediately began chattering about her week, telling Jonathan about the stories she had read, the drawings she had made, and the games she wanted to play. Jonathan smiled and listened, genuinely trying to be present in a way he rarely allowed himself to be. He watched her little hands wave excitedly as she spoke, and for a moment he forgot about emails, meetings, and deals. This was just a father and his daughter, and it felt peaceful. As they waited for their food, a young waitress came by. She was petite, with a friendly smile and kind eyes that seemed to shine with genuine warmth. Jonathan barely paid her any attention at first, focused on Emma and their quiet conversation. But then something happened that made him freeze in place. Emma's eyes lit up, and she suddenly jumped out of her chair, running toward the waitress without hesitation. Jonathan called her name, a little confused and surprised, but Emma didn't stop. She threw her small arms around the waitress, hugging her tightly, and whispered something that made Jonathan's heart skip a beat. "I was looking for my mom," the waitress, taken by surprise, returned the hug with the same gentleness, holding Emma close. There was something in her expression, something Jonathan couldn't quite place, that suggested she recognized the child. The warmth in her eyes and the care in her movements made it clear that this wasn't a casual interaction. Emma, innocent and trusting, didn't hesitate to show her affection, and Jonathan realized he was witnessing a moment that was more meaningful than he could understand at first glance. Jonathan approached slowly, unsure what to say. The cafe was quiet, and the few other patrons glanced over, sensing the unusual scene. He asked the waitress her name, and she replied softly, almost shyly, "Rachel." Jonathan noticed a hint of emotion in her voice, a subtle tremor that hinted at something deeper. He asked why Emma had called her mom, and Rachel seemed to struggle for words, her eyes flicking between Emma and Jonathan. It was clear she was trying to explain something complicated, something that couldn't be summarized in a sentence. Jonathan watched Emma giggle and step back, holding Rachel's hand. The connection between them was undeniable, and yet he had no idea who this woman was. Questions swirled in his mind. Who was Rachel? How did she know Emma? Why had his daughter run to her as if she had known her all her life? Jonathan's curiosity and concern grew with every passing second. He realized that this small cafe, this ordinary Sunday morning, had suddenly become a place where the past and present were colliding in unexpected ways. He gently invited Rachel to sit at their table, sensing that there was a story that needed to be heard. Emma, delighted to have Rachel nearby, continued to chat and laugh as if nothing unusual was happening. Jonathan, however, felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. He had always believed that money could solve most problems, but in this moment, he realized that no amount of wealth could explain the deep emotional connection unfolding before him. He had stumbled upon something entirely different, something human, something real, something that mattered more than contracts, stocks, or investments. As Rachel began to speak, Jonathan listened closely, though he had not yet grasped the full picture. He could see the care in her eyes, the genuine affection she held for his daughter. Emma's happiness, so evident in that embrace, made him realize how much his daughter had longed for certain kinds of love and attention that even he, despite his wealth, could not always provide. Jonathan felt a mixture of gratitude and humility. This moment was more important than any business deal he had ever closed. It was about family, connection, and the invisible threads that link people together in ways that money cannot reach. For the first time in a long while, Jonathan allowed himself to simply observe, to simply feel, and to simply be present. He watched Emma's little face light up with joy, and he watched Rachel respond with tenderness. It was a scene that would stay with him forever, the kind of memory that changes perspectives and priorities. That Sunday morning, in a quiet cafe with sunlight streaming through the windows, Jonathan realized that sometimes the most profound moments in life come unexpectedly. In the simplest gestures, a hug, a kind word, a shared smile. And in that realization, he began to understand that his life, no matter how full of achievements, was still missing something essential: true human connection. Jonathan took a deep breath and gestured for Rachel to sit down at the table. Emma climbed onto her chair again, still holding Rachel's hand as if she had known her all her life. Jonathan could see the warmth and comfort between them, and he realized that this was not a simple coincidence. He had 1,000 questions swirling in his mind, but he wanted to be patient, to let Rachel speak first. There was a story here, and Jonathan knew that interrupting it could spoil whatever fragile connection had just resurfaced. Rachel looked at Jonathan, her eyes reflecting a mixture of hesitation, concern, and something deeper, almost like a memory long kept secret. She seemed unsure where to begin, and Jonathan leaned slightly forward, signaling that he was listening and ready for whatever she wanted to share. For a moment, the cafe noise faded into the background. The clinking of cutlery, soft chatter, and distant laughter became irrelevant compared to the human story unfolding at this small table. Finally, Rachel spoke, her voice soft but steady. She explained that years ago she had known Emma's mother, Claire, in a time when life had been very different. They had been friends, co-workers, and confidants in ways that created strong bonds. Rachel had been someone who had looked out for Claire when she struggled with personal challenges. Someone who had quietly offered support when the world seemed too heavy. Jonathan listened intently, surprised that Rachel, a seemingly ordinary waitress, had played such a significant role in his daughter's early life. Rachel went on to explain that Claire had faced overwhelming circumstances. A few years back, life had taken her on a difficult path, one that had kept her away from Emma. During that time, Rachel had occasionally looked in on Emma, checking to make sure she was safe, happy, and loved. She had never tried to replace Claire, but she had been a comforting presence in Emma's life, filling small gaps when she could. Jonathan felt a lump form in his throat. He had always worried about giving Emma the best in material things, but he now saw that emotional support, the human touch, and consistent care were equally important. Emma, sitting beside them, listened with a quiet curiosity, though her young mind could not grasp all the details. She seemed to sense, however, that Rachel was someone important, someone safe. Her little fingers tightened around Rachel's hand as if she understood more than words could express. Jonathan felt a mix of relief and wonder. Here was a person who had cared for his daughter without expectation, without judgment, without seeking recognition. This was a kind of love and dedication that could not be measured in money or status. Rachel's voice shook slightly as she recounted moments she had spent with Emma. The small things that mattered, the bedtime stories, the quiet walks in the park, the playful games, the reassurances when Emma felt lonely or scared. Jonathan felt a growing respect for this woman who had given so much to his daughter, quietly, without any acknowledgement. He realized that despite all his resources, he could not have bought this level of care and devotion. The love Rachel had shown was authentic and selfless, and it had left a mark on Emma's young heart. Jonathan asked gently how. Rachel had managed to maintain this bond while also supporting herself, working long hours and living her own life. Rachel admitted that it had not been easy. There had been sacrifices, difficult choices, and moments when she had wanted to step back, but had felt a responsibility she could not ignore. She had watched over Emma from a distance at times, offered comfort when needed, allowed Emma to feel loved and secure, even in Claire's absence. Jonathan could see that Rachel carried both pride and burden in her eyes, a kind of burden that comes from caring deeply without recognition. As they continued talking, Jonathan reflected on his own life. He had been so focused on providing material security for Emma that he had overlooked the importance of consistent emotional presence. He realized that wealth could never replace the small, meaningful gestures that shape a child's heart: the hugs, the reassurance, the quiet attention, and the gentle guidance of someone who truly cares. Rachel had given Emma these gifts freely, and Jonathan felt both gratitude and humility. He recognized that this encounter was not just chance. It was a moment meant to open his eyes to what truly mattered. Rachel paused for a moment, glancing at Emma, who was giggling softly as she played with a napkin on the table. Jonathan took the opportunity to ask more about her own life. He wanted to understand her world, to see the challenges she had faced, and the courage it had taken to maintain her bond with Emma. Rachel spoke of long hours, low wages, and the constant effort it took to stay afloat while caring for someone else's child. Jonathan listened, struck by her resilience, her kindness, and her unwavering dedication. She was someone who had given without expecting anything in return, and he realized that this quality was rare and precious. Emma suddenly looked up and hugged Rachel again, whispering something Jonathan couldn't quite hear. Rachel smiled, tears brimming in her eyes, and whispered back. Jonathan watched them, feeling a mix of awe and wonder. This woman, this waitress, had stepped into a role that no one else had asked her to take, and she had done it with grace, patience, and love. He felt a surge of gratitude, not just for Rachel, but for the universe that had brought them together at this moment. Jonathan asked Rachel if she would consider continuing to be part of Emma's life more actively, and she hesitated, unsure if she should step forward openly. Jonathan reassured her that there was no expectation beyond what felt comfortable. He wanted her presence to be a gift, not a burden. Rachel nodded slowly, realizing that this moment could change everything, not just for Emma, but for herself as well. She had cared for the little girl quietly for years, and now she had the opportunity to be recognized and appreciated for the love she had given. As they finished their conversation, Jonathan felt a sense of clarity and purpose that he had not felt in years. He realized that life was not about the wealth he had accumulated or the power he wielded, but about the connections he nurtured and the love he shared. Rachel's story had reminded him that true value lies in kindness, in dedication, and in the willingness to show up for others, even when it is difficult. He knew that this encounter was only the beginning of a journey that could transform not just Emma's life, but all of theirs. By the time their brunch ended, the atmosphere at the table had shifted. There was a sense of hope, of understanding, and of new possibilities. Jonathan looked at Emma, who was now laughing and talking with Rachel as if she had always known her, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. He knew that this day would be remembered, not for the food they ate or the cafe they visited, but for the reconnection, the revelation, and the beginning of something beautiful. Jonathan had always believed that his life was full, but in this moment, he realized that true fulfillment comes from love, care, and human connection, something he had been reminded of in the most unexpected way. Jonathan sat back in his chair, still trying to process everything Rachel had shared so far. There was a calmness in the cafe now, a quiet moment that felt almost sacred. Emma was happily chatting with Rachel, showing off a drawing she had made the night before, while Rachel encouraged her gently, asking questions and praising her effort. Jonathan realized that the way Rachel engaged with Emma was unlike anything he had seen before. There was patience, understanding, and an unconditional warmth that seemed to flow naturally from her. It was clear she had spent years building trust with Emma, even in small, unnoticed ways. Rachel then began to tell more about the past. and Jonathan listened intently, hanging on every word. She explained that Claire, Emma's mother, had gone through extremely difficult circumstances several years ago. Life had taken a toll on her, leaving her unable to be present for her daughter. Jonathan's heart ached as he heard this. He had always been aware of the challenges, but hearing it from someone who had been close to both mother and daughter gave him a new perspective. Claire had been a loving mother, but life's pressures, financial struggles, and personal battles had created gaps in Emma's upbringing that even Jonathan, with all his wealth, could not fill. Rachel described how, when Claire could not be there, she had quietly stepped in to offer support. She had spent small, unnoticed moments with Emma reading her stories when Claire couldn't, taking her to the park, making sure she felt safe and loved. Rachel had never intended to replace Claire. She simply wanted Emma to feel cared for. She had been careful to respect boundaries, to stay in the background when necessary. But she could never ignore the bond that had formed naturally between her and the little girl. Jonathan felt a deep sense of respect for Rachel. She had given so much without ever asking for anything in return, and she had done it with humility and dedication. Jonathan began asking questions, trying to understand how Rachel had managed to maintain such a delicate balance. Rachel admitted that it had not been easy. There were times when she had struggled with her own life, her own work, and her own responsibilities. She had long hours, low pay, and personal challenges of her own. Yet she had made it a priority to be there for Emma whenever she could. She explained that even when she couldn't be present physically, she had kept an eye out, making sure Emma's caregivers were attentive and kind, and occasionally leaving little surprises like small notes or drawings to brighten her day. Jonathan felt a lump in his throat. Here was someone who had dedicated herself to the happiness of his daughter, and she had done so silently, without recognition. Without expectation, as Rachel spoke, Jonathan noticed Emma's expression change. She looked thoughtful, almost as if she was beginning to understand the story being told. "Rachel always makes me feel safe," Emma said quietly, looking up at her. Rachel smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's face, and Jonathan felt a wave of emotion he had never experienced before. He realized that Rachel's influence on Emma went far beyond simple care. She had shaped the little girl's sense of security, confidence, and her ability to trust. Jonathan understood that this was the kind of love that leaves an enduring mark, the kind that cannot be bought, only earned through consistent kindness and presence. Rachel paused for a moment, glancing at Jonathan. She wanted to make it clear that her relationship with Emma had always been respectful of family boundaries. She had never intended to interfere with Jonathan's role as a father, or to replace Claire as a mother. Her actions had been motivated solely by love and concern for a child she cared deeply about. Jonathan nodded slowly, appreciating her honesty and integrity. He began to see that Rachel was not just a supportive figure. She was a bridge between Emma and the part of her life that had been absent for too long. Jonathan asked about specific moments, and Rachel recounted several small, yet significant memories. She told him about Emma's first day at kindergarten when Claire could not be there, and how she had quietly accompanied Emma to ensure she felt comfortable. She described quiet afternoons of drawing, laughter, and storytelling, moments when Emma had been able to express herself freely. She talked about times when Emma had felt lonely or scared, and how she had comforted her without ever trying to replace her mother. Jonathan realized that these moments, though small in appearance, were monumental in shaping Emma's emotional world as the story unfolded. Jonathan reflected on his own absence in Emma's life. He had been so focused on providing financial security that he had sometimes neglected the simpler, yet more important, emotional needs. Hearing Rachel describe her care and devotion made him rethink his priorities. He understood that wealth and resources could never substitute for love, attention, and a genuine human connection. Rachel had given something far more valuable than anything he could provide. She had given Emma a sense of trust, safety, and emotional stability. Rachel also revealed that she had often wondered whether she should reach out directly or remain in the background. She had worried about overstepping, about causing discomfort, and about interfering with the family's private life. Yet, despite all those concerns, the bond she shared with Emma had never diminished. Jonathan listened, amazed at the courage it had taken for her to maintain such a delicate and selfless relationship. He realized that Rachel's devotion was extraordinary, and it humbled him in a way he had never expected. Emma, oblivious to the weight of the conversation but sensing the significance, reached up and hugged Rachel again. "I like when you tell me stories," she whispered. Rachel smiled, holding her close. Jonathan watched quietly, feeling a mixture of awe and gratitude. He realized that this small moment, this simple act of care, was a reflection of a deeper truth. The most important things in life often happen quietly, out of sight, and without fanfare. It was these acts of love and attention that truly shaped a child's world. Jonathan then began to ask Rachel about her own life. Curious to understand her as a person beyond her connection with Emma, Rachel shared that she had faced challenges, struggled with long hours and financial pressures, but that her life had also been filled with purpose. Taking care of Emma had been difficult at times, yet it had brought her immense joy and fulfillment. Jonathan realized that Rachel's story was not just about the past. It was about resilience, compassion, and the quiet heroism of ordinary people who make extraordinary differences in the lives of others. By the time their brunch was over, Jonathan felt a profound shift inside him. He understood that this meeting, this unexpected reunion, was far more than a chance encounter. It was a moment of revelation, a turning point that had the potential to transform not just Emma's life, but all of theirs. Rachel had quietly given years of care and attention, and now, with his awareness and support, that care could expand and flourish in ways it never had before. As they left the cafe, Jonathan felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew he wanted Rachel to remain a part of Emma's life, not out of obligation, but because she had already become essential. Emma skipped ahead, holding Rachel's hand, laughing and talking as if nothing extraordinary had happened, while Jonathan followed with a sense of awe and gratitude. He realized that wealth, power, and success were meaningless without love, care, and human connection. Rachel's presence had reminded him of what truly mattered, and he knew that this was only the beginning of a journey toward healing, understanding, and building a fuller, richer life, not in money, but in love and relationships. Jonathan also made a quiet promise to himself. He would do everything in his power to honor Rachel's role in Emma's life, to ensure that her contributions were recognized, and to provide support where it was needed. He knew that together they could create a nurturing environment where Emma could grow with love, security, and guidance. And as he looked at the two of them, Rachel and Emma, he felt a deep sense of hope for the future, a hope that came from seeing the power of selfless care and the extraordinary difference one person can make in another's life. After the cafe meeting, Jonathan could not stop thinking about Rachel and the quiet, steady love she had shown to his daughter over the years. Her dedication had left an imprint not just on Emma, but also on him. It had been a long time since he felt something so profoundly human, so beyond the walls of boardrooms, contracts, and financial decisions. He realized that Rachel's presence in Emma's life had given her something he, despite all his wealth, had sometimes struggled to provide: emotional stability and unconditional care. Jonathan began making small changes immediately. He started spending more meaningful time with Emma, not just sitting beside her while distracted by phone calls or emails, but really listening, really engaging. He watched Rachel interact with Emma and noticed how naturally the two connected. It was as if Emma had always known her, a bond that went far deeper than a simple acquaintance. Jonathan realized that Emma's happiness was partially tied to this ongoing relationship with Rachel, and he wanted to ensure it could grow safely and meaningfully. One evening, Jonathan invited Rachel to his home not as an employee, not as a casual acquaintance, but as someone who had become an essential part of Emma's life. He wanted her to feel comfortable and respected, without the intimidation that often came from stepping into the world of billionaires. Rachel arrived cautiously, unsure of how to navigate this new dynamic. But Jonathan greeted her warmly and made it clear that she was welcome as herself. Emma ran ahead to meet her, hugging her tightly. Jonathan felt a swell of gratitude and relief. This was exactly how he wanted it, a natural connection. Not forced, not awkward, just genuine. Jonathan also began to take steps to help Rachel in her own life. He knew she had worked tirelessly, often sacrificing her own comfort to care for Emma. He arranged for her to have new opportunities, helping her find better employment and even assisting with some personal goals she had long deferred. Rachel was hesitant at first, uncomfortable with the idea of receiving help from a billionaire. But Jonathan reassured her that this was not charity, it was recognition of the incredible role she had played in Emma's life. Slowly, Rachel began to feel empowered, realizing that she was finally being appreciated not just emotionally, but practically for her efforts. Over the next few months, the bond between Rachel, Emma, and Jonathan deepened. They spent weekends together, going to parks, museums, and small family outings where Rachel was welcomed not as a guest, but as a trusted friend and mentor. Jonathan observed Emma flourishing, her confidence growing as she knew that more of the people who loved her were fully present. Rachel's guidance and care gave Emma a sense of security and self-assurance that Jonathan had hoped to provide, but sometimes struggled to maintain due to his busy schedule. Jonathan also began reflecting on his own parenting. He realized that he had often equated providing materially with caring, believing that security, money, and access could substitute for attention, love, and consistency. Watching Rachel and Emma together made him understand that true care was shown in small, consistent gestures, the listening, the encouragement, the quiet reassurance, and the presence. He began to adjust his approach, not just being physically present, but emotionally present, ensuring that Emma felt heard, valued, and loved in a way that went far beyond wealth. One afternoon, Jonathan organized a small event at home for Rachel, inviting her to meet some of Emma's closest friends and a few of their trusted caregivers. It was a gesture of inclusion, a way of showing that Rachel was now an integral part of Emma's life in every sphere. Rachel, usually modest and reserved, was touched by the gesture. She realized that Jonathan's appreciation was sincere, that he truly understood and valued her contributions. For the first time, she felt fully recognized, not as someone filling a gap, but as someone who had always been a vital presence. Jonathan also began to help Rachel pursue her dreams outside of Emma's care. He arranged for training programs, mentorship opportunities, and even financial support for her long-term goals. Rachel had always been dedicated to Emma, often putting her own needs aside. But now she was learning that she could have both, her own future and the meaningful role she had with Emma. The transformation was gradual but profound. Rachel gained confidence, stability, and a renewed sense of purpose, all while continuing to nurture Emma with love and care. Meanwhile, Emma's transformation was equally remarkable. With Rachel actively involved and Jonathan fully present, Emma blossomed emotionally and socially. She became more expressive, more confident, and more willing to explore her interests. She trusted both adults fully, understanding that she was loved unconditionally. Jonathan watched her thrive, realizing that the combination of genuine emotional support and attentive parenting created a foundation far more powerful than he had ever imagined. Jonathan and Rachel also developed mutual respect and understanding. Their relationship was not defined by employer and employee or by obligation, but by shared commitment to Emma's well-being. They communicated openly, making decisions together about Emma's education, activities, and emotional needs. Jonathan found that having Rachel as a partner in parenting brought insights and perspectives he had never considered, and he valued her honesty and guidance. Rachel, in turn, appreciated Jonathan's willingness to listen, adapt, and recognize her importance. The changes in their lives were not just practical, they were deeply emotional. Jonathan began to experience a new sense of fulfillment, realizing that his wealth could serve not just to provide material comfort, but to empower and support meaningful relationships. Rachel experienced a profound shift as well, moving from quiet dedication and self-sacrifice to a position of acknowledged respect, where her efforts were appreciated and celebrated. Emma thrived in the environment created by their combined efforts, experiencing love, stability, and guidance from two adults who truly cared for her. Jonathan also began to involve Emma in small projects and decisions, encouraging her to express her thoughts, feelings, and preferences. Rachel was there to guide gently, helping Emma navigate emotions and understand relationships. Jonathan marveled at the ease with which Rachel nurtured Emma's curiosity and confidence, and he felt grateful that this partnership had developed so organically. It was clear to him that Emma's emotional health and happiness were being nurtured by people who genuinely loved her, creating a bond that would last a lifetime. As the months passed, Jonathan, Rachel, and Emma became inseparable in the best possible way. Weekends were filled with laughter, learning, and shared adventures. Rachel's presence provided a sense of continuity that Emma had missed, and Jonathan's efforts ensured that their home environment was stable, loving, and supportive. Jonathan realized that life's greatest success was not measured in wealth or power, but in these moments of connection, trust, and shared joy. Jonathan often reflected on the chance encounter that had brought Rachel and Emma together. He realized that life sometimes presents opportunities in the most unexpected ways: a single hug, a small gesture of recognition, a moment that seems ordinary but is extraordinary in its impact. That Sunday at the cafe had set in motion a transformation, not just for Emma, but for Rachel and himself. It had reminded him that love, care, and human connection were the true measures of a meaningful life. Rachel, once a quiet presence in the background, had now become an essential part of their family. Jonathan ensured that she knew her value, both to him and to Emma. Emma, in turn, felt safe, loved, and empowered, her world expanding with confidence and joy. Jonathan had learned to appreciate the true importance of consistent emotional support, and Rachel had found recognition, purpose, and stability. Together, they were building a new life, one that was richer in love and human connection than Jonathan could ever have. Imagine the transformation was complete, not in grand gestures or material wealth, but in everyday moments: the way Rachel helped Emma with her homework, the way Jonathan listened to her stories, the laughter that filled their home, and the quiet sense of security that now surrounded the little girl. What had started as a chance encounter in a small cafe had become the foundation of a life-changing partnership, proving that sometimes the smallest moments can create the biggest changes. Over the next months, the bond between Jonathan, Rachel, and Emma grew stronger in ways that surprised all of them. What had begun as a chance encounter in a quiet cafe had evolved into a life-changing connection. Jonathan began to notice the subtle ways Emma was thriving. She laughed more freely, asked questions with curiosity instead of hesitation, and showed confidence in small choices, like what she wanted to wear, what games she wanted to play, or even which books she wanted to read. Her little mind was expanding, nourished not just by material comforts, but by genuine emotional support. The presence of Rachel had become an invisible safety net, a comforting constant that allowed Emma to feel secure in a world that had once seemed uncertain to her. Rachel's role in Emma's life had transformed as well. She no longer felt like a quiet observer or a helper in the shadows. She was now fully integrated into the family, recognized for her contributions, and appreciated by both Jonathan and Emma. The transition had been gradual but natural. Jonathan had made it clear that Rachel's involvement was not just welcomed, but essential. He encouraged her to express her thoughts openly about Emma's upbringing, her education, and her emotional needs. This partnership allowed Rachel to see the value of her years of quiet care and dedication. For the first time, she felt empowered not just as a caregiver, but as someone who had a voice and a stake in shaping Emma's world. Jonathan himself had undergone a profound transformation. The encounter had reminded him of what truly mattered in life: human connection, love, and care. He had learned to be present in ways that went far beyond simply being physically near his daughter. He listened attentively, engaged fully, and made space for meaningful interactions. No boardroom deal, no business strategy, and no material accomplishment could compare to the joy of watching his daughter grow in confidence, curiosity, and happiness. Jonathan realized that wealth could provide comfort, but it could not create love, trust, or emotional security. That had to come from people who truly cared, and Rachel had proven herself as one of those people. Together, Jonathan and Rachel created a nurturing environment for Emma. They developed routines that gave her stability and structure. Weekends were filled with fun outings, park visits, and museum trips. But more importantly, the small, quiet moments became the foundation of her emotional well-being. Rachel helped Emma with her drawings, her stories, and her questions about the world, while Jonathan participated actively, sharing experiences and guidance. They encouraged Emma to explore her interests, to express herself freely, and to trust her instincts. The combination of love, mentorship, and attentive parenting allowed Emma to flourish in ways which Jonathan had always hoped for, but had not fully achieved on his own. Jonathan also made it a point to recognize Rachel's role in a practical sense. He supported her career ambitions, helped her with financial stability, and ensured that she had the resources to pursue her own dreams. Rachel had dedicated years of her life to Emma, often at the expense of her own opportunities. And Jonathan felt it was important to balance that. Through this support, Rachel gained confidence and independence, which only strengthened her ability to care for Emma. She no longer felt that she was sacrificing her own life entirely. Instead, she was building her future alongside the girl she loved, and the man who now fully recognized her worth. The impact of this new dynamic was evident in Emma. She grew into a joyful, confident, and curious little girl. She developed close friendships, engaged enthusiastically in school, and approached challenges with resilience. Jonathan and Rachel watched with pride as she expressed herself, knowing that her emotional foundation was strong because she had been surrounded by consistent love, guidance, and trust. Every hug, every conversation, and every act of care contributed to the little girl becoming more self-assured, compassionate, and happy. Jonathan also reflected on the lessons he had learned from this journey. He had always believed that providing for his daughter financially was the most important thing, but he now understood that the most valuable gifts were intangible: attention, love, consistency, and emotional support. Wealth could solve practical problems, but it could not heal emotional gaps or provide the reassurance that only genuine care could offer. Rachel had demonstrated the power of selfless dedication, and Jonathan recognized that these lessons would shape not only his parenting, but also the way he lived his life going forward. The trio also faced challenges, as any family does, but these were met with understanding, communication, and cooperation. When disagreements arose, Jonathan and Rachel discussed them openly, always keeping Emma's best interests in mind. They learned to compromise, to respect each other's perspectives, and to make decisions collaboratively. This model of respect and partnership gave Emma a sense of security and clarity. She learned that relationships could be based on trust, honesty, and cooperation, and that conflicts could be resolved with care and communication rather than tension or fear. Over time, Jonathan noticed that Rachel's presence had enriched his own understanding of family. He realized that love was not confined to traditional roles or expectations. It could be shared, nurtured, and multiplied through dedication and authenticity. Rachel had shown him that family could be defined by connection, care, and shared responsibility, rather than simply by blood or legal ties. This understanding reshaped his approach to parenting and to life in general. He began valuing relationships more deeply, not just with Emma and Rachel, but with others in his life. Appreciating that time, attention, and care were the truest measures of meaningful living. The turning point in their journey came one evening when Emma, full of excitement, presented a small handmade card to both Jonathan and Rachel. On the card were scribbled drawings of their family, little hearts, and a message in her uneven handwriting: "I love my family." Jonathan felt tears welling up in his eyes. In that moment, he understood fully that the family they had built together was real, strong, and enduring. It was not wealth, influence, or status that mattered. It was the love, trust, and care that bound them together. Rachel held Emma close, whispering words of encouragement and love, and Jonathan joined in, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment that he had never experienced before. Jonathan also began reflecting on his own childhood and the role of consistent emotional support in shaping a person's life. He realized that the small, caring acts of others had a lasting impact, far beyond material needs. Rachel had given Emma those acts in abundance, creating a sense of security that would influence her for the rest of her life. Jonathan recognized that his own parenting had been incomplete without such genuine human connection, and he vowed to continue fostering these relationships with intention and care as the months turned into years. The three of them developed a routine that was both comforting and joyful. Holidays, birthdays, and weekends became opportunities for shared experiences, traditions, and memories. Emma's growth, emotionally, socially, and intellectually, became a testament to the power of love and consistent care. Jonathan and Rachel celebrated her milestones together, proud not just of her achievements, but of the kind, confident, and resilient person she was becoming. Jonathan often thought back to that first cafe meeting, to the simple hug and the words Emma had whispered, "I was looking for my mom." That single moment had changed the trajectory of their lives. It had introduced Rachel into Emma's life in a meaningful way, and it opened Jonathan's eyes to the importance of connection and care over material provision. It reminded him that life's most significant changes often begin with small, seemingly ordinary gestures that carry extraordinary meaning. In the end, the three of them became more than just a father, daughter, and a devoted family friend. They became a family in every sense that mattered. Rachel's love, dedication, care had created a foundation for Emma that was stronger than Jonathan could have imagined. While Jonathan's support and guidance allowed Rachel to flourish in her own life, together they had created an environment filled with love, trust, and security. Proving that family is not just about biology or wealthy, is about presence, care, and unwavering support. Jonathan knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but he felt confident that with Rachel and Emma by his side, they could face anything together. The chance encounter in a small cafe had grown into a life-changing partnership, a story of connection, love, and transformation. What had started as a hug and a whispered question had become a lifetime of shared experiences, emotional growth, and genuine happiness. Jonathan, Rachel, and Emma had built a family not defined by circumstance, but by love, understanding, and the power of human connection, a family that would endure, inspire, and grow for years to come.